Hello. Good evening, everybody. Hey. I'm Moira Shori, and I'm the Executive Director of Zocalo Public Square, a unit of ASU Media Enterprise. At Zocalo, our mission is to connect people to ideas and to each other. Everything we do is free, and everyone is welcome. We publish original writing and host conversations. Based in Los Angeles since 2003, we're proud to be a part of America's most innovative university. ASU is a comprehensive public research university measuring success not by whom we exclude, but by whom we include, and how they succeed, advancing research and discovery of public value, and assuming fundamental responsibility for the economic, social, cultural, and overall health of the communities we serve. So I'm now going to tell you a little LA story. In 1913, Julia Morgan, the first licensed female architect in California, designed this building to house the operations of William Randolph Hearst's newspaper, the Los Angeles Examiner. This room housed the printing press until 1989, when the newspaper closed. Despite many attempts to demolish this building to make way for a parking lot, the Herald Examiner became a popular filming location even as it fell into disrepair. Movies and shows like The Usual Suspects, ER, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Murder, She Wrote were filmed here. So why am I telling you all this? Because it ties in with the reason we're here today. Legacy matters. How you repair and find new purpose matters. This grand old building is a senior citizen who has borne witness to the turmoil and changes of our great city. And in a similar way, Tzedek honors and serves seniors in our community who deserve respect for what they have contributed to society. I hope this theme resonates in everything you hear and do this evening. And I'm thrilled now to introduce Diego Cartagena, the president and CEO of Tzedek, who has focused his entire legal career on addressing the issues of access to justice. As a fellow with the Los Angeles Center for Law and Justice's Teen LA Project, Diego helped give low-income teen mothers and fathers a voice in court by providing them with legal advocacy and outreach in the areas of family and immigration law. Diego went on to serve as pro bono director for the Alliance for Children's Rights, while simultaneously serving as the agency's probate legal guardianship program director. Since joining Tzedek in 2012, Diego's work with the organization has resulted in increased clinic participation opportunities for law firms, the expansion of services for the Special Immigrant Juvenile Status Program, and the launch of comprehensive legal services for small businesses and entrepreneurs in underserved communities. Under his leadership, Tzedek launched a number of the organization's flagship programs, including Preventing and Ending the Homelessness Project, Rapid Response Family Preparedness Program, the Harbor UCLA Medical Legal Partnership, and the SSI Advocacy Project. I don't know how this man has all the time to do all this and still be such a cheerful delight. Over to you, Diego.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here this evening. It is such a pleasure to be with you all. Speaking of legacy, that is the central focus of this evening's event, and I cannot go on further without acknowledging the legacy of the individual that this program is named after, Rebecca Nichols. Rebecca Nichols was a member of Tzedek's new leadership council, that is the Young Associates and Professionals Board of Tzedek. And she was an incredible associate with Manat, Phelps, and Phillips, who dedicated so much of her professional career to giving back to the community. Sadly, we lost Rebecca much too early, and her family, including her parents, Jim and Merle, who are joining us via Zoom, dedicated this symposium in her honor. So we want to take a minute to thank her family and honor her memory. I also want to take a moment to thank our hosts, Zocalo Public Square. They have been wonderful. To thank our panelists, and to say that this is a project that has been in the works for months and months. we originally were contacted by the wonderful folks at the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs of Los Angeles County with the spark of an idea. The spark of the idea of how can we do something about families who own an asset, a home, but need help protecting that. And I enlisted the services of my colleagues, some of whom are here tonight, Ana Dar, who you're going to hear from, Dominique, Berta, and others who came together and put this wonderful program. So I am delighted that you all are all here. And I'm going to turn it over to Frank, our moderator, to introduce himself and our panelists.
Thank you. My name is Frank Stoltz, and I work at KPCC Radio, now known as LAist, and I'm the civics and democracy correspondent there. So I'm a little bit out of my area of expertise, but I'm very excited to learn about this very important topic tonight: legacy matters, ensuring justice and equity in estate planning for seniors. The topic couldn't be more important. We discuss it in an age of a growing wealth gap, especially the racial wealth gap, and during a continuing racial reckoning in America. Effective estate planning is a critical need to preserve and grow generational wealth in historically underserved communities. Many lower-income families are forced to sell their only asset, the family home, during probate, preventing further generations from building financial security. And I've forgotten my bios for each of you, so we're actually just going to start with you guys describing yourselves and perhaps how you got into the legal profession and just a brief background on yourself. So we'll begin with Ana Dar, Tzedek staff attorney with the Leaving a Legacy Estate Planning Program. Ana, why don't you just say a couple of brief words?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Frank. I'm Ana Dar. I've been at Tzedek since 2015. My way to the legal profession was long and roundabout, so I can't get into all that tonight. But I've really found a home at Tzedek, and I love working with our clients, and I love the work that we do, and I'm very happy to be here.
Fantastic. And attorney Terrence Franklin, an estate planner and partner with Sachs, Glazier, Franklin, and Lodice. Is it Lodice?
Lodice.
Lodice.
Yes, I'm a partner with Sachs, Glazier, Franklin, and Lodice, a firm that we founded in 2001. But we only do trust and estate litigation, so we only do the contested matters, disputed matters, and so it sort of gives me a little bit of perspective on how things can go wrong and why it's so important to get it right.
Thank you. And Rafael Carbajal, Director of the LA County Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. Rafael.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having us here. Rafael Carbajal, I have the honor and privilege of being appointed the Director of LA County's Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. Much like our good partners here at Tzedek, we were founded about 50 years ago. Our mission is to make sure that we advance economic justice and the financial well-being of all of our LA County residents. And this has been an issue that we have seen year after year. The folks that typically get taken advantage the most are our seniors, and we see that day in and day out. And then with COVID happening and all the issues that we're facing with all those reckoning, this issue became that much more important. And like Diego said, that's when we reached out, we connected, put our brains together to try to see what we could do to make an impact in this space.
Fantastic. As we heard, this is a relatively new project for Tzedek. Ana, let's start with you and ask you, how did you come into this kind of work? How did the organization come into this kind of work?
Well, we've always done advanced planning. We've always realized how important advanced planning is for our client base. Specifically, I worked in the elder justice team for a long time, so it's something that we talk about with all our clients. Simple advanced planning. But we always knew that there was a gap. We couldn't do as much as we wanted to do. We had some tools. We provided powers of attorney, simple wills, healthcare directives, all very beneficial. But we were missing something, right? Especially for our clients who own homes. We weren't able to do full trusts. And we did a whole environmental scan back in 2020 to find, is there anybody who does this for free? And we found one organization in all of California, El Dorado Senior Legal in El Dorado County. They're wonderful, and they helped us. And we worked with them a little bit to get, how do you do it? But they're in El Dorado County. So we can't refer anybody there. And we, in legal aid, right, we always want to be able to refer people to help. If we can't do it, then we need to help people find help, and there wasn't any. So we really knew that this is what we should look at doing, especially right as it comes to home ownership. Like you said, so many homes get lost in that process. If you don't have planning done, nobody can pay for the probate. The home gets sold. The family ends up with some money, but you lose all those huge benefits of home ownership, like borrowing power, like protection against inflation, all those things. So we started looking into doing this work back then, and we worked with great pro bono mentors like Terry and Alan Cutro at MSK, who really kind of helped us, set up a process and helped us with documents and everything. And also, I think Terry will talk a little more about funded a fellowship through UCLA. And then we were sort of primed, right? We were going down this road trying to get this work to start moving, and that's when the DCBA funding came about, and we were just really lucky to be ready to go. And yeah.
Terrence, how big a problem is this in terms of estate planning for underserved communities? And also talk a little bit about how you got into this work.
So it's a big problem, in part because at least I've always wondered what is the issue. I've been doing trust and estates litigation, as I said, since 1991. So quite a long time, and I've been watching cases, and I've seen a lot of people who would be referred to me sometimes because there aren't a lot of African American attorneys generally. And then within that group of African American attorneys, how many are trust and estates lawyers who do estate planning? There just aren't that many of us out there. And I would always wonder, because people would try to refer business to me and say, hey, how about this case or that case? And in many cases, it was below the threshold of what we could do in our firm. But I always wondered why it is that this is such a continuing problem. And I even sort of wrote an article, and I sort of speculated on this idea about how African Americans came to this country as property. And even once we could own property, there were so many people who took advantage of the legal system and illegal systems to take property from us. And so I think maybe there's in some way maybe a cultural, I'll just speak for myself, not a sense in my family that estate planning was an essential thing or was vital or was very important. At least I didn't think so for much of my life until I found out that there was a story in my family history that goes way back.
Which we'll get into. It's interesting, you talked about a lot of these types of cases fall below the threshold for your firm. Right. I guess part of the issue here is there's not a lot of money in it.
That's often the issue, and as we were talking about as well, many people have valuable real estate. This is Los Angeles, where the real estate market is so great, but people can't necessarily afford to maintain it or the upkeep as the elderly parents pass away and the descendants, if there hasn't been proper planning done. And I see the fights because that's so much a part of my practice is this trust and estate litigation. So trying to figure out how it is that we can do better made me think about it a lot. And so as I said, I've been thinking about how we could try to make this more of a way that's as accessible. And I was trying to find partners who could think about that as well. So that's been this process that I've been on the last couple of years.
It almost has to come in the realm of legal aid.
Exactly, and that's why I was so fortunate that I know about Tzedek, because even for many years I would think when I was trying to find someone that I could refer, I didn't think that there were really any legal services agencies that would take simple, basic estate planning issues or sometimes even probate matters that were below what a lot of lawyers would want to deal with, and sometimes people would try to deal with it themselves. And when we go to court, we see the pro bono people there who are often very frustrated by a system that doesn't often recognize their value as human beings. They're here, take this form, and people are speaking too quickly and throwing papers at them and that kind of thing. And if you're not experienced with it, you don't know that how to get through these processes. And so I've always felt that there was this gap there, and I didn't realize until I found out that Tzedek had actual, at least basic advanced healthcare planning, which I think was essential, and then additional estate planning services. So that's been like a thrill to know that there's somebody who's out there doing this kind of service.
Well, and the county is now involved. Talk a bit about what brought you into this work and brought the county's attention to this issue.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And just want to big plus everything that Terrence and Anna have already shared. So a lot of people wonder, like, why is the Consumer Protection Department involved in work like this? Well, if you think about it at its core, consumer protection is about economic justice, financial justice, and ensuring that folks get what they paid for, they are paid what they're entitled to, anything that they earn and that they keep. In particular, when we talk about marginalized communities, communities of color, we know that they make less money. They have less access to justice. They have less access to adequate housing. They live in more likely to live in destabilized situations in their own home. So as part of the work that we do, I'm very proud that outside of the alternate public defender's office and the public defender's office, we run the county's largest access to justice programming. We have our self-help legal access centers. We're at the forefront of our Stay House program, which is our eviction prevention work. We have our small claims advisor. We have mediation, our county-wide mediation program. The largest immigration legal services program in the country right now is being operated out of our department. So as we were going through this and we saw the impact of the pandemic, we saw that at the time, 1 out of 5 people that were passing away during the pandemic did not have their affairs in order. So all of the same issues that you hear here are the same issues that we see on the ground. Just like these services aren't accessible, where do folks go when these services aren't accessible? They go to the county, or they go to the nonprofits or philanthropy to find this work. And as you mentioned earlier, we're at this reckoning where we're looking at the role that we've played as a government and institutions, the institutionalized racism and the institutionalized exclusion of people. We look at redlining, we look at the impacts of that and the failure or the inability or the space that we created where folks can't build that wealth. And what we were seeing is exactly what Terrence was talking about. Folks were passing away. They were house rich, but cash poor. And when their parents passed away or their siblings passed away, they weren't prepared to receive this home. And they either ended up fighting and selling it, and there goes the opportunity to build that generational wealth. Or we're even seeing it on the housing market, where we're seeing that a lot of our older generations own these properties, and they're not preparing themselves for their next stages in life. And as a family has these battles over this property, they end up selling it. Who buys it? We end up seeing corporations buying it, or we see individuals buying it, and now we have one less affordable property, affordable housing stock on the market. So it's a big impact to a lot of big problems, and we took a leap of faith in partnership with Tzedek to try to launch this program to prove that there is a gap in this space, and then we need to step in and fill it.
What is the most common reason people are not doing estate planning, people in underserved communities?
Well, a lot of it is because what was mentioned earlier, they think they don't have anything that's worth putting in an estate. And a lot of it is these are conversations that we don't have. So I can speak from personal experience. I'm a son of undocumented immigrant parents. They came here with a dream, which was to buy a house, make a living, and make something better for themselves. Father with a 3rd grade education, mother with a high school education. Started off as a gardener, turned into a contractor. With that, he bought his dream, which was opening a restaurant, and then he opened a meat market. We were flying high for a few years, but guess what they forgot to do? They forgot to estate plan. So when my father passed away, guess what happens to all of our property? He had business partners and different folks. So within 6 months, everything that took 25 years of a lifetime to build was gone. So the impact of that is personal, but not only is it personal because it's me, it's personal because I see it every day with the folks that we help that come in through our programs and that are coming to us looking for help.
We're already into this, but I'm going to come back to you, Anna, and ask, how does the lack of estate and advanced planning typically materialize for low-income families in LA County?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what these two have been illustrating really beautifully, right? And I wanted to add to what Raphael was saying, right? One of my favorite quotes that I've heard in a presentation once is that estate planning is an inherited trait, right? If your parents did it, you've seen it, you know what it looks like, you know how it works, and you're so much more likely to do it. But when there's a huge gap, right? There's no education, there's no access to estate planning for huge parts of LA, for large communities, so nobody's doing it. And so, right, we're looking at our part. If we're trying to prevent some of these issues that Terrence is talking about, where there's complicated fights, nobody can pay for probate. Dealing with that process as a self-represented litigant is extremely complicated. So we're trying to prevent some of those cases, right, by doing estate planning for a generation now, which will hopefully pass down and prevent these things in the future. But there's certainly, I mean, it's such a multifaceted problem, right? First, you need to do estate planning now, but you also have to deal with all the matters where nothing was done. And now there are these really complicated tangled title issues, right? There's so many homes in LA now where the original owner is like 3 generations back. They passed away 50, 60 years ago. The family still lives in the house, but nobody owns it. That person passed away. So there's like 2, 3 levels of probate that needs to be done. And who's going to do that, you know?
There's kind of an irony that, you know, we see the Wall Street headlines that talk about this great transfer of generational wealth that we're expecting with baby boomers passing away. And you know, that's the headline that we see, but there's also this other headline, which is that the same wealth disparities that have existed across race are going to be exacerbated by this same movement. So that, you know, that gap is going to continue to grow if we don't do something about it. And I think that's part of the impetus that is driving, you know, all these various initiatives that I think we're trying to push forward to encourage people to get estate planning. There's more efforts nationwide to deal with heirs' property. There are additional statutes and things like that that are being developed. So trying to reckon with this idea, I think, but it's an ongoing struggle.
We talk about people not being in the habit, families not being in the habit of estate planning. I think we also touched on folks thinking they don't have wealth and therefore don't need to do estate planning. Those are a couple reasons. Are there some other reasons why particularly underserved communities, particularly people of color perhaps, are not doing estate planning at all?
Yeah, you know, as I said, you know, sometimes I think there's a cultural, a fear of recognizing or talking about estate planning is recognizing death or bringing death on in some way. And I think there's sort of a cultural bias I think that many people have in that way. And I think there's a resistance to recognize the fact that this is a reality that we're all going to face, is that we're all going to die, and whether it's us or someone around us, we're going to have to deal with those consequences. And even as important is that the possibility of some disability that occurs on such a frequent basis. And if you thought about it and wanted to make sure that if you were disabled in some way, who's going to be making those decisions for you? That's all a part of the advanced healthcare planning. So all of these things I think are, you know, I think I diverted from your question, but I think all of those are things that we don't want to think about, but I think we have to think about in addition to making sure that we're able to transfer wealth across generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that, so we're talking in your program at Tzedek, mostly estate planning or advanced health planning and other aspects as well?
We do all of that, and we do try to talk to all of our clients about the simpler advanced planning, like advanced healthcare directives, and that's, I have to say it because I say it every time I speak in public, but that's one thing that everybody should take away tonight is to make sure you've done your advanced healthcare directive. It's very simple, and it's extremely helpful.
And what is it for people who may not know what an advanced healthcare directive is? That is where
you you can choose who should speak on your behalf if you're unable to in a medical setting, and you can also leave end-of-life instructions. You can change it whenever you want. It's not written in stone, but it's so helpful. We have a self-help packet on our website in a blank form. But that, you know, that's one thing. And then powers of attorney are hugely helpful. There's also all kinds of little things you can do, even if you don't own a home, even if you don't have, you know, a lot of financial value, right? You can still do little things like beneficiary designations on your bank account to make it a lot easier for those you leave behind. Like I always say, anything that you do, any instructions that you leave, any step that you take, that's what you were saying, right? People don't want to talk about death and dying. We had a law clerk one summer who we make them present what they work on, and it's real mean of us, but it's nice. They talk about their work and then they present. And she said on her last slide that advanced planning is an act of courage and love. And I thought that was it's so true though, because you're making it easier for those you leave behind. I try to talk to clients like that, like on the empowering side, like you're helping your family. This is a gift. You're taking away even an ounce of stress and struggle when they're grieving you. So and I'll sit with you and do it. So those are really important. Even though it seems small and you think that you don't have anything, we all have something that's valuable to us and to our family or whoever we're leaving behind, our loved ones, our friends. So, yeah.
So I don't necessarily have to own a home.
No.
In other words, estate planning involves any and all types of wealth, and no matter how small or the wealth is the message I'm hearing.
Yeah, and because it's also typically not just the estate planning, but you're also thinking about life planning and so forth. And I'll confess that I hadn't actually gotten my estate planning together until earlier this past year, and my estate planner's over here, so I'm glad that he did that work for us. So.
Yeah, but to add to that too is those little small decisions that have big impact too. Because when you don't have a medical directive, what does your family do? Or whoever is left behind. And then what ends up happening is you end up leveraging the property that you have in order to pay those medical bills. Or if you don't have the home in a trust and other issues happen, then you lose that opportunity to pass that on. And we see that on a regular basis, right? So all of our work and that the county does in order to alleviate poverty and right some of the issues around our anti-racism, diversion, and inclusion work that we're trying to do, that we're barely undertaking as a county, a lot of it is rooted in addressing some of these issues, but we haven't put enough effort into, okay, now we help somebody get some wealth or get a job, get the funding, we help them buy a house, get things in order, but what happens next? So we're starting to lose a lot of folks at that point in time, so we need to step up and start supporting that. It's like training somebody for a job, and then you send them out without pointing them in the direction of where those jobs are or supporting them after that. So I think we have a responsibility, if we believe in helping people pick themselves up by their bootstraps, we have to be that bootstrap that they pull on when they need it too.
Yeah. Well, and you touched on the answer to this. Why should we care so much about trying to have more people from underserved communities get estate planning? We're talking about historic injustices here, not just individuals exercising their choice and passing down generational wealth.
Yeah, and the biggest challenge too is, we talk about breaking the cycle of poverty, and we have successes that do break that cycle. But then if you fail to plan, you create that cycle again. So to my point earlier, is we have to make sure that we help people all the way through the door, not just to the door.
Mm-hmm. Anna, you wanted me to touch on this issue about how is the legal services perspective on this particular issue? How is it unique?
Yeah, and that's a little bit about what we talked about, right? That estate planning is not just for the wealthy. You have more than you think, and it matters. Right, and we work with a lot of low-income clients with victims of trauma and lots of cultural backgrounds, and it's really important to still to meet with your clients and figure out what are your goals, what do you want. It matters. It doesn't matter that you don't own $1 million. Even folks with houses think, like I think that was Raphael who said, even folks with houses think that they don't have anything, and a big part of what we're trying to do with this project is also a lot of education and outreach, right? To reach folks in underserved communities and just explain the value of estate planning and provide access to that service. Because if you don't know that you need to do it, if you don't know what the outcome is of not doing it, then how would you ever figure out what you need to do? And also, you're probably not going to you might end up, people go get a legal Zoom trust, which may work, but it may create all kinds of more problems. It's just having access to education and information from a safe source, it's extremely valuable. We also have a lot of, self-help and informational documents that people can take small steps on their own. Like a small thing like most people don't really think about doing is just like your electronic assets, right? You got to set up, if you don't set up like a legacy contact on your Apple account, your family can never have your pictures or access to any of it. So it's like, but yeah, I think education and outreach is a huge part in communities with trusted partners so that the message is coming from a trusted source and we can just reach more people and explain the value of doing estate planning.
And what kind of work is Tzedek doing in that area now?
Well, we work with a lot of senior centers. And we go and do presentations, we always go out for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day because this is also an elder abuse issue, right? Doing estate planning, doing advanced planning in general can help prevent financial elder abuse and other. So we go out and work a lot now with senior centers and other outreach centers.
Talk a little bit more about how this is an elder abuse issue as well.
Well, we have, we have a homeowner protection unit, right? And a common form of elder fraud is, right, unscrupulous child makes parents sign something unwittingly. Oh, this is just for me to help you, mom, so I can help you with things. But really it's a deed. Now kid owns the home and serves mom with an eviction notice. Right? Tzedek could probably help mom get her house back in her name, but if mom passes away now intestate, who gets the house? Well, that kid. And if you have more than one kid, they would all get it. But if we can do good estate planning for mom, then she can have a trust, protect the home from the abuser, and pass it down to the other kids.
Terrence, you've got an interesting personal story, and I'd like to prompt you to share that with us now.
Sure. So part of why I am driven by this idea of legacy and what's important in estate planning and so forth is that I had been doing trust and estates litigation for about 25 years. So will contests, family disputes, things like that. When I found out there was a will contest in my family in 1846, my great-great-great-great-grandfather was a white farmer in Jacksonville, Florida, who owned my great-great-great-great-grandmother, whom he described in his last will and testament as his mulatto slave, Lucy, aged about 45. But the will went on to set her free, along with her 8 children and 6 grandchildren, who all had to make their way from Jacksonville, Florida, to Illinois to claim their freedom. And as it turns out, his brother challenged the will in court. So there was a will contest, and this is the kind of law that I've been doing for 25 years, and I didn't know this was part of my family history. But now I recognize that it was part of my legacy, and my destiny really was to find and uncover these documents that I've been exploring and uncovering. My husband's over there. He's helped me find these things, and we've been documenting. I've done a tech talk and things like that. But what it's made me realize is that it took all these people, really, to achieve this ultimate result. I mean, ultimately the judge upheld the will and ordered the evil brother-in-law to pay $28.08 in court costs. But what happened was Lucy ultimately had to make it to Illinois, but it took all these people to really make sure that she was able to achieve this freedom. It took lawyers, it took the lawyers who got an order giving me the ownership of the file so I could actually see this and be able to tell you all this story. And I realized that we all have this role to play in shaping history. We stand between everything that's ever happened and everything that's yet to come, and so we can help bend the arc of history towards justice by looking out for the future, for those descendants, those people who come after us. And so when I think about estate planning, it's these people who are right in front of us that you're thinking about now, but maybe if you're also thinking about a legacy, something that is may survive 150 or 170 or 200 years from now, I think that can help inspire us to make sure that we're all making sure that we're taking care of business and doing what we need to do, because if it weren't for somebody looking out for us before, we wouldn't be here today.
Are there modern day equivalents of this?
Of that kind of
well, abuse. I mean, Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but we're talking now about sort of, well, we talked a little bit about the elder abuse.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are lots of situations where people are willing to take advantage. And, because I do litigation, I see this all the time. I see the conflicts and the situations where a situation just looks slightly different from the other guy's perspective, but the truth lies somewhere in between. And that's part of the reason why investing in the cost of doing the estate planning, if you can afford it, or if you cannot, then you have this Tzedek or another service that can help do this. The cost of doing the estate planning in advance is going to save so much in attorney's fees and in trouble and heartache and anxiety years down the road. And this elder abuse is on the rise, and people are with documents the way that you can DocuSign, yes, exactly. That's the magic word. There's increasing stories about those kinds of things and people really taking advantage.
I didn't know that. Abusing the DocuSign function?
DocuSign function, and with AI and the ability to create fake signatures, facsimile signatures that are, it takes expert testimony ultimately to prove that something is or isn't, and that's a cost that you don't want to deal with if you can try and get well done documents that are well prepared.
Right. That's how another way that doing advanced planning is a preventer of elder abuse, right? If you've met with an attorney who sat down with you and prepared your, say, just a power of attorney, it's not super complex, but then an attorney has met with you and talked about the risks and the benefits, and they've assessed your capacity or whether you're being unduly influenced, and there's a file. And, versus, a family member printing one out from the internet and maybe helping sign it. It's just a little thing to give someone else access. And, if you have a power of attorney in place, if my, son has access to see what I'm doing with my bank account, he'd know if I'm spending huge sums of money suddenly because of a scammer or something like that. It's like adding a second pair of eyes, extra protection.
I want to open it up for questions in just a second. So keep your questions in mind, and we'll open up the microphones. Raphael, I wanted to ask you, and again, you've hit on this a bit about why the work is important to you and the mission of the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs, but are there other efforts also that the county is supporting that intersect with this work?
There is, but this work is really about what you leave behind and what you don't leave behind, right? You don't want to leave that heartache, the heartbreak, the fighting, the arguing over what you do. But one of the core of this effort for us too was to right some of the wrongs from redlining, ensuring that the folks that were able to actually purchase a home were able to retain it and pass it on. Another program that we recently launched is our Green Line Home Program. We're providing $35,000 grants for first-time home buyers, specifically targeting these communities that were in the past not allowed to participate in this market. So we're making some significant investments there to start creating that wealth that hopefully eventually they will pass on. And just generally, when we think about all of our anti-poverty work, that's what we're trying to do, is trying to get people out of poverty, build out wealth, and then this program, we're trying to institutionalize it so that people could keep it.
We talk about people of color who are doing less estate planning. You had some statistics actually earlier, Anna, didn't you, about who does the most and who does the least estate planning?
Yeah, we just found the statistic in our scan that I think the average, only 1/3 of Americans have a will, but if you split it by demographics, white people, I think it's 39% of white people have estate planning done, but when you break it down by race, I think the lowest, I could have the number wrong. I think Lane might know, actually. I think it was 20, it goes down to 18% for Latino population, and I think 23% for the black population. So there's just a huge difference in the amount of planning being done.
Raphael, I imagine language barriers are a problem here.
I think that's a big barrier, as well as, we've talked about some of the cultural issues too. If we look at certain cultures in particular, I can speak for mine, you always think about my kids will take care of me, right? But sometimes the kids won't take care of you, and you don't want to end up part of the, the county does have our public administrator program for folks that fail to plan, but you don't want, shout out to the work that they do. It's great work, it's compassionate work, but it's not the same. You don't want to leave the decision on what happens to your property, to your health, or anything else to a civil servant. We're great, we do the work that we do for a reason, but you should be the one making those decisions for yourself, even when you're here or when you're not.
All right, are there questions from the audience at this point? I want to make sure that we have enough time for any questions from folks who are out there. I can't quite see everybody, but I think we have one right here. Oh, we have microphones, yeah.
Your family suffered significantly from not protecting the business. What recommendations would you give to business owners for potentially using estate planning to protect their interests and maybe pass it on to the family after their passing?
No, that's a great question. And I would advise any business owner or any entrepreneur, as part of just starting or thinking about starting your business, have that in order. Right? You can't be a successful business owner without having your own house in order. That includes your own financials, your own budgets, and your own estate planning. So as you move through and you start building those opportunities for wealth, and you start accumulating some of that, and you start accumulating some of that success, even when you're not accumulating it yet, you should have your planning ready. We know too that running your own business is typically you don't have your own health care, you're your own HR, your own risk management, you're your own everything. So there are some added health and personal pressures that one faces as a business owner that makes one want to make sure that we have our house in order. My father, when he passed, he was only 42 years old. Operating 3 businesses, working about 16 hours a day. Only day he had off was Tuesdays. That's when the A-team was on, so he had to watch it on Tuesdays. So that's how we bonded over the A-team. But we have to take care of ourselves, both physically, mentally, and financially.
I think we have another question over here.
So I have one for Anna and then one for Tay. Anna, who's your favorite coworker?
That's classified. Oh, it's Marine. It's Marine.
And Tay, your practice only deals with trust litigation. You said, what's the most common problem that arises when with trust?
I think, we end up with a lot of breach of fiduciary duty claims, or claims where people are claiming that a trustee didn't act properly or sufficiently to the standard of care. So I think that's pretty frequent. We do a fair amount of will contests and things like that. But I also want to recognize Lane, who is there. He is our fellow, the UCLA Tzedek fellow, because it's the Fellowship for Equity in Trust and Estates Law. Am I getting it correct? It's close to something like that. But I putting in a plug because this was sort of a dream that came about a couple of years ago. I think I wrote an article. Somebody reached out to me, Alan Cuttrow, who's a board member of Tzedek and who's also connected with UCLA, and he said, hey, trying to get more people of color in trust and estates. We'd love to try and figure out how we can do that. We started talking. We talked about Tzedek. We talked to UCLA. We drummed up funds from law firms around the country, around the city, money from the ACTEC Foundation, American College of Trust and Estate Council, to fund a fellow who is now here sitting in front of us. So it's amazing to see the fruit of effort come forth, and he's now working with Tzedek and working with UCLA, and it's going to be working with students, doing statistics and helping with the estate planning practice, basically. So I'm sorry, I completely went off the rails, but I had to acknowledge this person here who is, I think, going to do a great thing for us here. So I'm glad that you're here, Lane.
Yeah, it's amazing that only now legal aid groups and pro bono folks are getting into this area of practice. Why do you think it took so long? I mean,
Probably
and there's
probably
a lot
just
on our there's a
limited
lot on the plate.
resources.
There's
You know,
housing. I know there's
Yeah.
there's a lot going on.
I think it's probably limited resources. So, what is the thing that people think last about is preserving wealth if you don't even have anything,
Yeah,
and at
we're
least
usually like responding to like an immediate crisis, right? This is, which I love about this work. This is meeting in a calm place, not in crisis, planning to avoid one. But it's not always a luxury that we have in legal aid, right? Because we have to deal with immediate issues.
All right, we have other questions in the back, or here up front first. Wait for the microphone so we can all hear you. We also have an online audience. Glad you guys are here online, and we'll take some online questions in just a moment. But why don't you go first, sir?
Yes, hi. So I'm a business owner and small business owner, and I'm also a veteran, disabled veteran. I'm also LGBTQ. Some years
Talk a bit more into
some
the mic.
years ago, I attempted to get some estate planning done with the small amount of assets that I have. Today, I have a few more assets than back then, but I couldn't access, and I went through a nonprofit at the time, and all they were able to do was to allow for my relative to come down, and we did a power of attorney just based on some application they filled out, but it was overseen by what do you call those people that
paralegal.
Yeah, not a paralegal.
Notary.
A notary. Yeah. So and it was a lot of work that went into just doing that, right? There was a whole. We had to schedule it. We had to get it down. And I tried to further that process, and I was promised at the time that I would be able to. I haven't been able to get back to it. I'm no longer with that particular organization, and so when you talk about access to these nonprofits or whatever, it's still so convoluted in the getting it done. What would you advise me to do at this point? Because like I said, I have a few more assets. One of the assets that I have now is an intellectual property asset that I don't really know what that means, but I know it means something.
Well, I mean, it's all very personal, right? Estate planning is personal. You are certainly free to call our intake line, and we can do an intake and evaluate if we can assist, right? But you're right, the process is time consuming, but that's also because, right, when we work with clients to determine where they want their things to go and who they want to do what, I mean, it's a serious process, right? And we do have to talk through it at length and figure out, what the whole big picture is. We need to know everything that you own and where you want it to go and all those things. So it is a complicated process, which is good, right? But about finding access to services, it's hard. We're one organization, there's 2 attorneys. We do what we can, but we don't have unlimited reach. But you're certainly free to call us, and maybe we can assist. But I couldn't tell you right now, because the answer is always, it depends, right?
No, but I think to your point, that's a perfect example of why we decided to step into this space, because we see the accessibility to other legal resources through the other funding and the other programming that we have, but we realize that there's this gap, and that's what we're trying to fill right now. Obviously, what we have is not enough, but what we're hoping is that we demonstrate the value, the impact that this project brings to our community specifically, so that we could continue to advocate for additional funding to make it that much easier to actually access the services. And the reason you weren't able to access those services is because nobody was funding them in the past. So that's what we're trying to achieve here in part.
Frank, we have an online question from an individual who has identified themselves as a public interest tenants attorney that is considering getting into estate planning. Their question is, I'm wondering if there are any, quote, low bono model examples in the county, and if this is a gap that perhaps needs to be filled.
Terrence, do you want to take that, or
I don't know if it's me or if it's Anna, but
I don't
low bono?
For estate planning, no, I've never heard of one. We don't have connections with anyone. It's not something that we know of. It's either you pay or you come to Tzedek right now, but yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's the challenge. It's an important need in the community, but nobody's providing it. But, again, that's why I was excited when I found out that the county was also providing funds to support getting the word out. I'm hoping that all of this will also lead to, more resources and more support for these services.
More places we can refer folks to, right?
Do we have another online question, or? All right, let's do one more online, and then we'll come over here.
So the next question is, what do you tell folks who don't have any family or friends to appoint as a healthcare agent or power of attorney, or no one they want to leave their property to?
Well, this comes up a lot, right? For a healthcare power of attorney or a healthcare directive, there are really involved forms. Ours is pretty straightforward. Ours is a very simple form that's geared to be very accessible for everybody. But there are very in-depth healthcare directive forms, like 5 Wishes and Canner have very more detailed ones, where you can really leave a lot of instructions on what you want for your care, how you want decisions to be made. Even if you don't have a person to carry it out, then your medical provider can follow those instructions. For a power of attorney, it's more complicated because you do need someone to act on your behalf if you need it. Then an option, if you have, again, it comes down to, how much you have and what we're talking about, but you can hire a private fiduciary. They're usually paid by a percentage or a flat fee. That's a professional who basically steps in and make those decisions and acts on your behalf. Other than that, you can set yourself up with auto pay and protect yourself in certain ways, but if you don't have an actual agent, there's not much you can do other than kind of plan around it. I don't know if you can think of anything else.
I can't either, not being a planner truly.
And if you want, if you don't have someone that you want to leave your things to, you can still leave your things to an organization, right? Even if you just have a bank account or something and you don't need to write a will, you can put them as a beneficiary. You can put a charity as a beneficiary on your bank account if that's where you want it to go. But you got to tell them so they know to collect it.
All right, let's come over here.
Hi. So I know that when it comes to advanced healthcare planning, there's been, at least I think recently, a lot of organizations that have been successful in marshaling pro bono volunteers from law firms and other organizations to do clinics. And I know in part that's because the healthcare forms are relatively simple, and even somebody in M&A or a different group, can do that. I'm wondering, since you have 3 people from 3 different, realms of the law, do you think that there is a possibility that that kind of clinic model could work for estate planning as well, or do you think it's just too individualized to be put into that model?
It depends. We do healthcare directive clinics too, and it lends itself really well to that. Estate planning it's a complicated matter, right? We as attorneys, we really need to, right? We need to understand the whole, like I said, we need to know the whole situation. We need to get a clear picture of the family if we're going to represent you and help you prepare documents. So it's tricky. I know there have been more like clinics where you can do trust, but it's more like a self-help thing, like fill it out and then go record this on your own. And that can be really, I think it can work. I can't really speak to how it works, and because when we do, especially for our clients, right? If we do a trust for a client, we do all of it, right? They have the originals. We record the deed for them. We make sure the house is transferred. It's from start to finish to make sure that everything is taken care of. So I think there's a risk involved that things will get not completed. But I can't say whether it could work.
I think she was asking each of you that question.
Yeah, and because I don't really do planning, it's hard for me to say. Again, you're sort of seeing people at that direct level of what. I know that there are simple ways that, depending on how simple your assets are, as you say, if it's a bank account, and that's all you really have to deal with, and designate whoever you want on your bank account, and that's at least you've thought about that and given consideration to that. But as far as who else is, I don't know. I don't have a good answer, unfortunately.
I can speak from a programming perspective. If we think about this exercise, it's really an exercise in trust, right? And it's super complicated, and it's deeply personal conversations that you're having with a trusted partner who's at this point your attorney those types of conversations are very difficult to have in a group setting. I believe that you could start that difficult conversation as a group. It also helps build trust when you see people that look like you having these difficult conversations or starting to initiate the ideas and the thought process that leads you to the estate planning. I think that's a good way to bring folks in and start having that conversation, essentially hook them, and then bring them in to the individualized service. And then the reality is this is something that we're trying to learn with this program too, what works and what doesn't in order to reach these communities.
We have 5 minutes left over here, and I think we have 2 questions in the audience.
Okay.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to Tzedek because they were very instrumental in getting a conservatorship over my mother. Unfortunately, it was at that point, my brother had already, done a lot of rip-offs. But one of the things that I'm curious about is as far as your outreach, what's happening, for example, with, and I'll say Black community, because a lot of them, for example, are really into the big churches and you mentioned the senior centers. And so is there any outreach program going to speak? Because what I see happening, because I work a lot with seniors, is that on occasion, or not occasion, it happens a lot. They get loans. Someone will come along and dangle, in their kids' face, $20,000. Yeah, okay, here. And the kid, maybe drugs, alcohol, has never ever seen that amount of money, and they take it. And then what happens 2 years later, the house is in foreclosure, and it's being lost. And that happened a lot in Inglewood, the Crenshaw area. I'd say Ladera, Baldwin Hills, that happened a lot. Especially since, like with Inglewood is a good example because that's the latest. But when they found out that stadium was being built, the investors were coming in like crazy and having little meetings and, like I said, dangling money. And that was even before it was announced to the public that they were doing all of that construction. Same thing in the Crenshaw area when they brought in the train going out Crenshaw. A lot of the people who had owned these houses, and I'll say, because my mother was in that area, a lot of Black people owned the houses, some of them outright, but again, because they weren't maybe totally in capacity to make a decision, a kid, somebody again dangles money, and then they've lost it. So and back to my question is, so how can you get the word out so that people are educated, especially, and I say a lot of them are connected to a lot of the churches in the area, so that they are connected to the idea that before somebody signs, somebody's going to go look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a perfect example of a educational outreach that is needed in a community, right? And I don't know, we have an outreach coordinator in our elder justice team. I don't know exactly, where we've gone and what we've spoken about. We also have a homeowner protection team, like I mentioned earlier, that do educational presentations as well. But I couldn't say, I don't know exactly where our outreach has been, but I would, they're pointing to someone. Oh, it's Amy. This is our homeowner protection team supervising attorney right here.
Both Amy and I are so grateful in partnership with the DCBA, that allowed us also to have a full-time outreach coordinator, and in collaboration with DCBA, looking at our communities and being able to strategize on the areas we need to go to. Those 2 areas that you just mentioned, we happen to have one workshop in the Crenshaw district that just happened this month, and then we're also planning already at the Inglewood Senior Center and also in the Crenshaw district. So a lot of us are natives to Los Angeles, so we're very mindful of what's happening in our community. So we're being very strategic, and DCBA is helping us, making sure that we're making the influence impact in those communities. And we have the outreach model where we start with education and also working with the churches, but then going back and doing workshops that might just be one-on-one, where we can't do a full estate plan in one workshop, but we can talk to you and we can get the conversation started in order to determine future. So thank you for bringing that up. And I know DCBA posts like future outreach events on their calendar. And then that's always a place to visit to find out what's going on with the programs. And they have another great partner in doing this work, St. John's, that's embedded in the East Los Angeles community. So to make sure that both different points in Los Angeles are getting this critical information.
All right. And
So I'm going to do you a big favor. Win, raise your hand. See that handsome gentleman right there? We can connect with them as soon as we're done, and we could talk through some of this stuff.
all right, let's get one more question in, ma'am.
Oh, hi. My name's Amy. I didn't have a question. I am actually just Berta's counterpart at Tzedek with the homeowner protection team that I think was mentioned earlier. So just really briefly on that topic of outreach. So just to summarize, my team does essentially the real estate arm of when things go wrong with people's home. We're a homelessness prevention team for elderly or low-income homeowners who are facing the loss of their home, a lot of times due to elder abuse, but due to other issues as well. We are a small team, but we are always trying to get the word out that one, we exist, and also two, how to prevent those things before they happen. And estate planning is a huge, huge part of that. But in terms of outreach, we will go wherever and whenever someone wants us to come and do a presentation. We are advocates at heart, and we're happy to jump in and do a presentation. But we can do outreach with as many community partners as Tzedek has, and I know a lot of people here are part of those community partnerships, and we do have a lot of them, but really word of mouth and just reaching out to your neighbors and making sure everything's okay. There's a lot of stigma around loss of homes or people being scammed, and so letting them know that there is a resource, there is a video that they can watch on our website or on the DCBA's website about how to avoid these things, and then also how to get help when they happen is really the first step a lot of the time. I'm a big advocate for being nosy with your neighbors about that.
What a great note to end on. Thank you so much. Thank you to Anna Dar, Terrence Franklin, and Rafael Carbajal. You guys were great.
Well, thank you.
We have one more announcement.
Just want to thank you, Frank, for being an incredible host and moderator of this panel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Round of applause for Frank. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. We have members of the team here if you have questions for them. We have members of the DCBA team here. Thank you for joining us, and be sure to keep an eye out for our series of events in honor of our 50th anniversary. Thanks, everyone.